Alrighty, good afternoon, folks. My name is Can. I'm here with Lyngso, and this is our regular Wednesday afternoon Zoom classes. So today we have the Putnam Sisters here, Lisa and Kathleen, and we're going to be learning all about gardening vegetables. And this class is being recorded, and you can view the session on community resources pages on Lyngso's website, and also be sending a link via email after the class for you folks as well. If you have any questions during the talk, go ahead and type that in the chat and we'll address that towards the end of the talk. So let's welcome Lisa and Kathleen. The floor is all yours.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
I'm Kathleen.
And welcome. We want to welcome you today. We know a lot of people are zoomed out, so we really appreciate you guys being here. And let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about fall vegetable gardening, how to plant your fall vegetables. But we're going to throw in a few things about tomatoes and some summer vegetables also, because right now that's really what everybody's harvesting and eating. And so problems are starting to come up with some. Kathleen and I are professional vegetable gardeners. So about 3 of our clients or so are having some problems with tomatoes. So we'll talk about that as well. And if you just could put your questions in chat, and we'll get, Can will monitor that, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So what we're going to cover today is kind of the why, where, when, what, and how of vegetable gardening. And we'll go into pest protection a little bit, cover crops, tools, the value of daily observation, and tips on fall planted vegetables. It's not fall planted, it's really more fall harvested. You're actually planting your fall vegetables right now. So why grow your own veggies? Kathleen, you want to take that?
Because they're delicious.
Yep.
Well, one, you plant what you want to eat, which is very important. You can use your garden like a grocery store. So whatever is ready in your garden is what you eat that day. And you know for sure there are no pesticides, fertilizers, and they're higher in nutrients. They're more nutrient dense.
And that is the next slide.
And that has actually been proven. The USDA did a study in the 90s of the average amount of minerals in vegetables. And since the 1940s, when we started using bombs as fertilizers, the plants don't have to work with the soil to get their food when you fertilize them, and the nutrient value decreased significantly, which there are some theories that that's one reason why we now have an obesity problem, because when we eat, we're not being satisfied because we're not getting the nutrients we need. Just a little aside there.
Thanks. All right. So that's kind of the why. Now, where to grow your veggies? Really, you need only 3 things, but it helps if you have a few other things. Sun, well, probably the most important is soil, but we'll talk about soil quite a bit. And we'll talk about irrigation and watering. So we'll talk about sun here. And that's for your root vegetables and your leaf vegetables. You need 6 hours of sun hitting the plant's leaves, not dappled sun, not dappled shade, of pure sun. So if you go out and the sun is hitting you, that's pure sun. For fruiting vegetables, which is what's growing right now in the garden, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, melons, they need 8 hours of full sun to develop. And with the, pardon me?
Those are minimums.
Yeah, these are minimums. More is always better. So if you have a place where it is in the sun from when the sun gets up in the morning to, sets at night, that's really the best. I mean, obviously that's how the food gets, that's how photosynthesis happens. So that's where the plant can fend for itself. And I have noticed from years of gardening, if you give it what it needs, if you give it the correct sun and good soil, you will just avoid so many diseases and heartache. So, and the one thing that you also is very good and doesn't come into the sun, soil, or water is patience and curiosity and the power of observation. So when you see something funky going on, you see a leaf is curled, or you see your tomato has a brown spot on the bottom, or, just my type of gardening is kind of the 15 minutes every day, not the 8 hours every weekend. And I do feel that gives you a lot of observation of what's going on, what's different today than yesterday, how many, my kale is, I need to start eating it faster because it's going to start to bolt pretty soon. And but it's just that every day checking in on your garden. So that's the first thing I do in the morning is I go out to the vegetable garden. And Son is Son, do you want to tell your story of when you worked retail?
Yeah, I used to work at a nursery, and the customers would come in and this happened to me all the time. They would want to buy most often a Meyer lemon. And I would tell them, that's great. They do wonderful. I was working in South San Francisco, but that it needed full sun. And they would say, well, how about 6 hours of sun? Or how about 4 hours of sun? And I would tell them that they're not going to have success with their tree. They're going to have all sorts of insects and diseases because you can't negotiate with what the plant needs. It needs what it needs, and it's not up for negotiation.
It's not a contract you're writing with this. All right. So where to grow your veggies? So these are two gardens. Well, they're actually both my garden. On the left is my raised beds of my current garden, and then on the right is my old garden. And I will have to say, I'm a big fan of growing in the ground and not in raised beds. The plant can access the minerals and the nutrients that are in the soil a lot better. Watering to me seems easier. It's way, way, way less expensive because you're not building raised beds. Now, the downside is that, and we'll get into protection, and the downside is that with a raised bed, you can control it more easily. You can put covers over it more easily and control the soil more easily. But my money is still on raising crops in the ground, which is what Kathleen does with her vegetable garden.
Yeah, my own private vegetable garden is all in the ground. When I need to cover them, I just use 1/2-inch polytubing, and I just put a floating row cover over it. And I way prefer the ground. I think all the nutrients and the life of the soil is in the ground, much easier than it is in a raised bed.
Yeah. Now, that being said, if you have like a tremendous gopher problem or squirrel problem or rat problem, I mean, with the raised beds, you can put hardware cloth on the bottom, which if you do the hardware cloth on the bottom, make sure you go up the sides of the inside of the raised bed, at least, 3-4 inches. So the little gopher doesn't get in between the raised bed and the wire. So for some pests, it's easier to control in raised beds, but my money is still on you get better fresh fruits and fresh vegetables doing it in the ground. Okay. And, where? Okay, still talking about how much space do you need? So I think I put in here, it is true, like right now for me, where I'm at, I'm in Portola Valley. All my summer stuff is just starting to come in. So all my zucchini, my cucumbers, my tomatoes, and August is the month where you want to be planting your fall garden. So it gets a little tricky. You have to interplant at first. You have to, in my tomato bed, pretty quick here, I'm going to be planting a whole bunch of broccoli. And we'll get into that a little, why I'm following it with broccoli. But so right now, August, September is when you're planting all your fall and winter stuff, and you haven't taken out any of your summer stuff, because your summer stuff's going to go till October, November, really until your first frost. For me, my first frost is October 15th. It depends where you're at, in San Mateo County. So you're always just kind of, with gardening, you're always thinking 6 months ahead, because you're always sowing your seeds in your 6-pack, and they have to germinate, and then they have to be 6 weeks old, and you have to be thinking about what you're planting. So it's, you're always thinking down the road of what you want to be planting. Family of 4, I say 4 raised beds. And I'd say that's about right. If you have 4 people in your family, 4 raised beds gives you enough fresh fruits and veg, I'm calling fruit, tomato and all that's fruit. Gives you enough fresh fruits and vegetables where you can, almost every day, you'll be eating dinner out of your garden in some form or another. Do you want to add anything to that, Kathleen?
I would say you need a minimum of 3 for crop rotation.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. And then I also kind of grill it. The middle one is my artichokes, and that's in my dad's landscape. That's not in mine, but you can go ahead and, well, I don't know. But sometimes neighbors will let you, you have to make that decision for yourself.
You can guerrilla garden a little bit.
You can guerrilla garden a little bit. Just take over a few flower beds here and there. All right. Where in living soil? So we'll talk about soil for like 5 slides. Do you want to start, Kathleen, with the soil food web?
Yeah. The soil, they've done a lot of research, and the soil is alive. There is more life in 1 teaspoon of soil than there are people on the planet. Is that right? That's pretty close to right. Maybe about the same. Anyway, the most important thing about the soil food web is the plants, because the plants is what gives off exudates. The plant actually, 1/3 of its photosynthate, which are sugars, carbohydrates, it puts into the soil to feed all of the life in the soil, because the fungi that it feeds brings it back nutrients. So if you have a healthy living soil, your plants are going to thrive. But again, the plant is what feeds the soil.
Yeah. So all those carbohydrates are being stored in these roots, and then the
roots give off sugar to feed everybody.
Yeah, and the little microorganisms come and eat the roots and then gives them nutrients. So it's an exchange. Okay. How do you feed the soil? I guess I'll talk about that. You grow, like Kathleen said, you grow a diversity of plants, and you grow plants. Never should your soil be bare. It should always have roots in the ground. Feed the soil compost, grow cover crops, and mulch. Keep your soil covered and cool. That'll help in so many ways. So it's also called green manure or living mulch or green mulch. When you're growing plants, that can actually act as your mulch for your vegetable bed, because it's just preventing that sun from hitting the soil. And when the sun hits the soil, it kills the microbes in the top of the soil. So you always want to keep your soil covered, either with living plants or with mulch. Don't till. So we don't turn our soil. It actually makes it super easy. You want to reduce disturbance in your soil. And my beds that I do have now, we have found the best soil is the Lyngso veggie blend or their essential soil, or you could mix the veggie blend with their essential soil. We don't work for Lyngso, but it just is, it's really good stuff. It's alive and just full of microorganisms, and that's what you want. Then I compost between crops. So I plant out 3 times a year. I plant spring crops, summer crops, fall crops, and we'll go through a slide with this, between each changing of crops, I put compost on the ground, on the soil. Don't let your soil go bare. No bare
If you
soil.
don't compost at home, Lyngso's Diesel, essential Diesel, whatever it's called,
Structure.
you don't need a ton of it. You need like a 1/2 inch or so, but between crops, put that in.
And that'll act as your fertilizer, and then you don't really need to fertilize.
And it keeps your soil alive.
Yeah, which that's the main thing, is keep that soil alive. Why feed the soil? Food web. We kind of went into this, but you feed it to increase organic matter, to increase soil organisms, water holding capacity, infiltration, which means how the water moves through the soil, and it improves your soil structure. And the main thing really is, if you have living, beautiful soil, you are going to have an amazing plant, and the amazing plant is going to have amazing vegetation. If you're eating the leaf, like kale or lettuce, or spinach, or amazing fruit like tomatoes and the whole cucurbit family. And I have found, if you have healthy soil, you don't have to use pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and you have super, super nutritious vegetables.
And delicious.
And very tasty. Do you want to go through Gabe Brown?
Yeah. So Gabe Brown is a farmer up in North Dakota, so he has a very short growing season, but his goal was to grow his soil. And he's a farmer, obviously, farmer rancher. And he found that by disturbing your soil as little as possible, because when you disturb your soil, you kill not only a lot of the life in it, but you break up all the aggregates, the glues, the gomulin that hold the structure of your soil, so it's not, compacted and dead and awful. So you want to disturb your soil as little as possible. You want to always be growing something, and you want to grow as many different things as possible. It's like if you ate a diet of one thing only, even if that one thing was good, even if you ate corn all the time, you're going to get sick. And your soil's the same way. You want to have a diversity of plants, because that's going to feed different things in your soil, different nutrients. You're always going to cover your soil with either mulch or plants. And he says incorporate animals. He's a rancher. That's not possible for a lot of people. But if you get like the diesel compost, that's incorporating animals, because that's turkey manure.
Yeah. And we have some resources at the bottom. And I should mention, Can will send out this presentation to everybody, so you can take notes if you want, but you don't have to. But I just read, this is from UC Berkeley. It's how to sequester carbon. And that's the top one. That's Wendy Silver. She is a professor at Cal, and she started the Marin Carbon Project. And her big thing is, if all ranchers and farmers could just put like a 1/4 inch of compost over everything, that will do more for sequestering carbon. What that does is it brings the soil back alive. And if you can get a hold of this article, but I think if you just Google her name, and then the perennials move in, and the perennials are what is grabbing the carbon from the atmosphere and putting it into the ground where it belongs. It doesn't. So we want to get all the carbon out of the atmosphere and into the soil. And just by making that soil alive, just by putting compost over that soil, we can sequester just literally, millions of tons of carbon. A good book is Dirt to Soil by Gabe. Watch Kiss the Ground. If you haven't watched that yet, that came out kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's well worth watching. Or there's also one, you could just Google these, Living Soil or Symphony of Soil. And then there's a lot of the scientists are women. So Chris Nichols, Christine Jones, and Christine Olson, and Kathleen and I have had the good fortune to, we have gone to seminars pre-pandemic with all those women who are really fabulous women. And if you want to see a no-till farm, we went to visit Singing Frog Farms up in Sebastopol. And that's a good example of a farm that they never till their soil. All right. Benefits. Oh, this is you, Kathleen.
I love cover crops. In fact, I just was reading before this class started, I was just reading an article that the California almond growers put out, and they did a study on water needs of almonds, which was like, the drought, and almonds need so much water. And they found that almond orchards that had cover crops needed 50% less water.
Wow.
Yeah, which seems a little bit counterintuitive because there's more plants. So you think that it needs more water, but actually the opposite is true because the water stays there. So cover cropping, first let's explain. A cover crop is any plant used to protect the soil and feed the soil. It improves the physical property, the structure, increases organic matter, protects the soil, improves water infiltration. There's no downside to cover cropping. And in my garden, my backyard garden, I have 3 4-foot rows by about 20 feet. And I always have one of my rows out of production and in cover crop. And I do that for 2 seasons. And then I plant my crop, because by cover cropping, you're doing all these wonderful things for your soil. And I don't even add compost. I just cover crop.
Wow.
And I just chop it and I leave it on the soil, and I throw seeds into it, and I put a floating row cover over it, and bam, it grows up. And I've just had amazing success cover cropping. And it also pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it in the soil where it should be.
Yeah. And Kathleen has totally made me a believer, although I haven't converted all the way because I still put compost down. But one of our clients, I thought the soil was so bad that there was no rehabilitation for this soil. And Kathleen said, just watch me. And she cover cropped it. And I think I have photos of that somewhere. It's not in this talk, but it was like cement, and it made it into like butter. It was transformational.
And what had been happening to this soil, it was raised beds, but only like a foot tall. And the gardeners they'd been pulling out everything, roots and everything, and then turning the soil every season. So it was just dirt. There was nothing living in the soil. And Lisa thought we should remove all the soil and put in Lyngso's veggie blend. And I said, no, we can fix it. So if you have awful soil, you can fix it. Plant daikon radishes if you have heavy clay, and let it go to flower and chop it down, and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yep.
Cover crops again, rotation. This might have some stuff that you don't agree with, Kathleen. but and the point with this is always be growing something in your soil for soil health. You should never ever have soil that's not growing something. Legumes, annual ryegrass, arugula, buckwheat, radishes, the daikon radish Kathleen just mentioned, turnips. I took vetch out because vetch has kind of taken over my entire lot, and it's so invasive that I don't use vetch anymore for cover cropping.
I don't like veg. And
Yeah.
if you go to, well, a lot of places have what's called Santa Cruz erosion control, and it has veg in it, don't buy it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't like veg.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this one, Kathleen?
Soil level, leave the roots in place. I would just say, no, I think this is good.
Okay, so chop and drop means what Kathleen was talking about. You have a tall plant that you've grown as a cover crop. You can just take your pruners and you can just go chop, 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 chop into like 1-2 inch pieces, and then just let it drop onto the ground. And then you're mulching, you're leaving the roots, always, always, always leave the roots in the ground, never, ever take your roots out. And you just chop and drop, and then that becomes your mulch and you plant right into it.
That's, I was gonna say, what the soil's 3 favorite things, it's the life in the soil. Its first favorite thing is living roots. Its second favorite thing is dead roots, and its third favorite thing is mulch.
Yeah.
So if you have those 3 things, your soil will be very happy. And if your soil's happy, you're happy.
And your plants are happy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough about soil. Irrigation, drip irrigation is the most efficient, more efficient than hand watering. That is a true statement. However, when I first started gardening, I didn't have an irrigation system and I only hand watered. And I would say, I know this is going to sound a little rainbow and unicorny, but you kind of develop a relationship. I mean, you are then looking at that plant every day. You're digging in the soil a little bit to see if it needs water. And you really develop a relationship with your plants and with your garden if you're only hand watering versus when it's all on irrigation. I mean, you can theoretically go away for 2 weeks, and I mean, which is sometimes good, but you just don't really get that relationship with your plants in your garden. What would you like to say, Kathleen, about irrigation?
Just because this is again when I used to work at a retail nursery, and customers would come in and say, you know, my plant isn't doing well. And my first question was always, well, how often are you watering it? A lot of people love their plants to death. And more often than not, they would say, well, it's on a timer. Like that was an answer. I mean, that means nothing to me. I don't know how often your timer's running, and I don't know for how long. So even if you have an irrigation system and a clock, it changes. In January, your plants need, 10% water compared to what they need in July. So you need to be aware that just because it's on a timer doesn't mean it's being watered properly.
Yeah, and you need to know what your emitter, if your emitter is 1 gallon per hour or 2 gallons per hour. And so, yeah, you need to, if you're not putting it in yourself, you need to know what's being put in and how much water is actually getting onto into the soil.
Yeah, and even if you do have drip irrigation gets eaten by gophers, it gets leaks. I mean, it's not a one and done. You
Yeah.
still have to monitor it fairly closely.
Yeah, I've got some leaks right now in mine, but it's where my cover crop is doing the best because the leaks are watering it. I put the little dram redhead in here. That's I think they say the dram redhead has 1,000 little holes, and so it mimics rain better than any other And Dram makes a lot of products. So they also make a nozzle that doesn't have 1,000 holes. It probably has 100 holes or something. But I really do like the Dram Redhead if you're hand watering.
I,
And we say water in the morning if possible, but it doesn't matter. Just water if your plant needs it. You know, if it's a super hot day and your plant is wilting, go and dig around a little bit, make sure that the soil is dry, and then go ahead and water if it needs it. It's, you know, just water when you need it. Okay, now we're on to when, the where, when, what, why. So I mentioned that I think of gardening in 3 seasons, and we'll show a planting chart in just a minute. And really the month of December and January, there's nothing to do. And also July, there's nothing to do other than harvest. I mean, you are harvesting. So you plant your spring crops, February, March, a little bit into April. You plant your summer crops, late April, May, a little bit into June. And you plant your fall winter crops now, August, September, some into October, but kind of August, September are your main months for your winter crops. And what are your fall winter crops are, and we'll go into this too. There's going to be a chart on what you plant when, but it's brassicas and I still will call it Chinook daisy, but it's, you know, brassicas, beets, spinach, all those yummy things.
what's a brassica?
Pardon me.
What's a brassica?
Oh, brassica is your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kohlrabi, kale,
Mustards?
mustards, rutabagas, turnips, arugula. Those are all brassicas. Those are all in the same family. And the name, you'll also hear them called crucifix or crucifix, whatever, crucifix plants. And that's because if you look at the flower, it's a little petal above and a little petal below. It makes a cross. The flower has 4 petals opposite of each other. And that's how it got its name. So you'll hear them referred to either brassicas or crucifix. Your tomatoes, peppers. So we kind of went into this, but they can produce all the way till October, sometimes even November. And so you're trying to plant all your fall stuff, but you still have all your summer stuff. So we interplant. I also try to like to keep a bed or a row where I know I'm going to be tired of zucchini. Let's say I know by August 15th, I don't want any more zucchini. So I would cut my zucchini off at soil level, and maybe that's where I go ahead and plant some of my fall stuff. So I still have, I overwintered a pepper plant this year, so it's producing now. I tried to do it as a perennial and it worked kind of. The peppers are little on it. They're not these great big peppers that I got last year from it. But anyway, I don't know why. I just wanted to say that. Okay, and we should probably talk a little bit about verticillium. We'll talk about that a little later, but why you want to plant broccoli where your tomatoes are is there have been studies done by UC Davis that it will decrease. Verticillium is a fungus that lives in your soil and it can live in there for almost 30 years. So you do not want verticillium. And broccoli is good at keeping verticillium under control. And also, did we talk about rotating crops?
No, not yet, but also crab meal and broccoli. The study used both of them, and that really lowered the verticillium count in the soil.
Okay.
But crab,
yeah, CRABBBB.
BBBB, not the other one.
Not the night fertilizer stuff.
Yeah, night soil.
Night soil. Marathon broccoli is a broccoli I like to plant, but I plant marathon broccoli in spring, not in fall, because it can go all summer and then you can have broccoli all summer long.
Oh, I did an experiment with my broccoli this week.
You did?
Yeah, it had gone to seed
Yeah.
Because when your broccoli starts to flower, you can't eat it anymore, because what you're eating is the immature flower head. And I let my broccoli go to flower because the bees love it. And so it went past going to flower and it went to seed. And so I took my head shears and I chopped it down to the nubbins,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna see if it grows.
Okay. I did that with my cabbage this year. I still have cabbage. Sweet Jesus, we've been eating a lot of cabbage. But I had like 6 huge cabbage heads, and I left the roots in the ground, took them off. We ate them, gave some away. And then I had like 5 little cabbage heads from each of those. So
Yeah.
one benefit of the chopping it off at soil level,
Sometimes it'll grow again.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
most of that plant is roots in the ground. It's not above ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of it's below ground.
So this is my personal favorite planting chart. It's from UC Master Gardener, Santa Clara County, and the link is in the show notes at the end of the thing. But you can see how January doesn't have anything, can't do anything in January really. And December's, other than maybe asparagus, but asparagus is going to be an October, November plant out. December, you're not doing anything. And then you look at July, really, other than Brussels sprouts and chayote, which I have never grown. Those are your months. You're really not, you're not planting anything in those months. But this chart, it mixes up all your summer and winter stuff because it's alphabetical. But you can just see you're always, so the 3 seasons, your spring and your fall, you're planting the exact same thing. And then your summer crops are unique. But so arugula, you can do February, March, and then you can do it again September, October, maybe August. Beets the same. You do them February, March, and you do them again September, October. Broccoli. So these are all your cool season. When you plant February, March, April, that is, you're growing cold into your warm months. And now we're growing warm into our cold months. And the plant is going to react differently. You can have the exact same broccoli that you plant in February, and it's going to go for like 8-9 months, maybe more. You plant that exact same broccoli in September. Let me get to broccoli. And August or September. And it's going to go to seed in about 3 months. So growing from cold into warm versus warm into cold, you're going to get a different reaction from these plants. And that's just part of the observation and noticing, okay, when I planted my marathon broccoli in March, I ate broccoli off of that plant for months and months and months. And now this one, I'm going to get my one head, maybe a few side sprouts, and that's going to be it for that broccoli. Then it's going to go to seed. It's called vernalization. It goes to flower into seed. So I love this chart. I just color coded it. Well, you can't really see, I'm sitting at my desk. This chart is next to me right now, and I look at it every single day. And I have been gardening for decades, and I still look at that chart every single day.
Every day?
Every day, Kathleen.
I have mine on my iPad and I look at it all the time.
It's amazing. It's like, what should I be doing right now? This is telling me what I should be doing right now. It's really good. It's really done well.
Yeah.
So that's on their website. And this is Pam Pierce's Golden Gate Gardening. So if you live in San Francisco or you live in a cooler climate, I would recommend Pam Pierce's book, Golden Gate Gardening. And she has different planting charts for different sunnier areas and stuff. But I think this is a very good chart for this is sunnier microclimates in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Here's one of my favorite slides. So this is all your warm stuff is over on the left and all your cool stuff's over on the right. And so your warm stuff, you have, that's what you're eating right now. All the Solanaceae family, which is your tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, is what you're eating now or will be eating soon. My tomatillos doesn't have tomatillos yet. It's just coming in. Your cucurbits, which are your melons and all your squashes. You grow winter squash in summer. You eat it in winter. Corn and beans are warm for the legume family, and peas are cool season. But what we're focusing on in this class is all the cool stuff. So your mustard family, which we talked about, arugula, bok choy. So this is all the stuff that you should be planting right now. And the goosefoot family, your beets, chard, spinach, quinoa, amaranth. Quinoa and amaranth, I mean, they're pretty invasive and I don't grow them, I just buy them. Do you grow them, Kathleen?
No, in fact, the amaranth that, luckily I didn't plant it, but the amaranth that one of my clients, it's just like one plant got out of control and now it's always in her garden.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful plant. It's a burgundy plant with this gorgeous seed head that comes up and goes, up and down like that. I mean, it'd be beautiful in a flower arrangement, but it just sets seeds and those seeds go everywhere. And the chickens don't seem to like it, oddly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I know they're very invasive, quinoa and amaranth.
Yeah.
So my beets this year, I let my spring beets go to seed, which I hadn't ever done before. And now I have a bed just full of beets. All of them, fell to the ground and all went to seed, which is great with me. I don't know if it's an heirloom beet or if it's a hybrid. And the difference there, if it's an heirloom, it's going to be true to itself and it's going to produce another beet like the beet that I ate. If it's a hybrid, like an F1 hybrid, it has traits from the mom, traits from the dad, and you don't know what you're going to get. Same thing when you see all these volunteer tomatoes come up in your garden. If you grew only heirlooms, you're fine. But if you grew hybrids, you don't know what you're going to get. You might get a really delicious tomato, or you might get something that's horrible, or doesn't produce at all, or is sterile, like a donkey or whatever, mule.
Or mule.
Yeah.
Yeah. I let my my carrot go to flower because the monarch butterflies like it. And it's actually a beautiful plant. And I know there's going to be little carrots coming up all over, but it's a hybrid. So I don't know what I'm going to get.
Yeah. So they might be tasty. They might be
But
horrible.
it's a good point that Lisa and I are both talking about, like, we're trying this and this happened. And, 90% of gardening is experimenting, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we have all these charts and we have all this knowledge, but you have to play with it and you have to see what happens when you do this and when you do that. That don't be afraid to fail and just kind of let things happen sometimes.
Yeah. I will say I'm like a super lazy gardener.
Yeah, me too.
So I just let my arugula go to seed and then I get my next crop. I let a lot of things go to seed, because especially if I'm growing heirlooms, because it's so much easier. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It just seeds itself and there you have it. My fennel now, that's gotten a little out of hand and it's now all over my yard. But so I mean that could happen. But anyway, I just completely agree with Kathleen. 1 part education and 9 parts experimentation, and that's how you learn with gardening.
And it's also the fun of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I love that slide. Tools. Tools and techniques. Actually, I brought my little basket. You can see my little basket on the left, and I brought my little basket with me. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I just wanted to demonstrate. Kathleen and I, we both use the ARS pruners versus the Felco. And the reason why is I like it. You just squeeze it and it opens, which the Felco, you have to actually open it for it to open. And I can't tell you how many times it's just so nice to be able to squeeze it and open it. We do recommend, I mean, there's Corona and there's other brands, but these are more expensive, and ARS and a Felco are going to be more expensive. But I feel they're worth the money. I mean, I think a Corona might be like $20 and this might be more like $60, but I really do think it's worth it. And you can get replacement blades, and also you can sharpen. So the sharpener, Kathleen buys these for me. And so they're always, I know what I'm always going to get in my Christmas stocking. And you go, this is a diamond sharpener that she buys me. And you just probably can hear that, but you just go along your blade, just like you would sharpen a knife, going all just one direction, not back and forth. And Kathleen sharpens during pruning season, like fruit. You probably sharpen it every like half hour or every 45 minutes or something.
Yeah,
So,
and the way you know you need to sharpen is if you make a cut and you see little fringes on the edge of your cut, and it's just like little hair fringes. It's not, big fringes, but little fringes on the edge of your cut, you need to sharpen your pruners.
yeah. And my only other really two tools, this is a soil knife. And it took me a while. I always liked hand trowels before, but now I actually really love my soil knife. And this is just a pocket boy. It's a little saw, and I do use it for pruning trees. But really, when you're taking out that broccoli or you're taking out that cauliflower or that cabbage, you can't do it with your pruners. At least I can't. It's big. I mean, it's like that. So I just use my saw, and I just keep those roots in there and use my saw to take that out. And that's all that's in my. That's all
And
that's in my
if you
goodie
grow
bag.
in the ground,
Pardon
and
me?
if you grow in the ground and you only have those 3 tools, gardening is very inexpensive.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't need to spend a ton of money gardening.
Exactly. Don't exactly that. Just grow in the ground. Doesn't cost you anything. And then, I mean, really for $100, you can be on your way. Gloves. I wear gloves sometimes. Oh, I do wear a hat. I have my hat with me. But I got it on sale. So that's all I really use. Those 4 things are kind of all I use. Sunscreen, but that's about it. How you plant a plant, really with my soil knife, I just go straight down, pull it towards me, pop from a 6-pack, let's say, just pop the plant in there, and you can tamp it down a tiny bit, not a lot, and then move on. You can plant a plant maybe in, I don't know, 5 seconds, I guess.
If you have like a 4-inch tomato, you might want to dig a little bit deeper because you want to plant your tomato deep. But yeah, most of your plants, soil knife, couple inches down, boom, you're done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And do not buy carrots or beets in 6-packs at the nursery. Direct sow them. If you look at Lisa's chart, it will a lot of them will say, go back one more.
Transplant directly.
Yeah. So a lot of them say transplant only, but you'll see like carrot says direct seed. There's no transplant on the carrot line because you will spend hours trying to straighten out all those little carrot roots that are in the 6-pack. It's not worth it. You're still not going to get a good carrot. Just plant carrot seeds.
Yeah. Amen.
And Mokum carrots, MOKUM, are delicious.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah, thanks.
And we'll go in a little bit now, how to do seed and start. So if you're growing from seed, and I have a chart, it's coming up, of what you must direct sow, what you can either direct sow or start from a little plant, and what you must start in flats. But before we get there, we'll so if you're going from seed, you have to start your brassicas.
You're too late.
Yeah, you're too late. Well, you are too late for this season because it would have had to be, if you're going to plant something on, let's say, August 15th, you would have had to start that seed like 2 months ago because you need to give it some time to germinate, like let's say a week to germinate and about 6 weeks to become a little plant. So for this season, just go ahead and buy your little seedlings. I like Half Moon Bay Nursery but it's easy to get to off of 92 in Half Moon Bay, and Kathleen goes to San Lorenzo Hardware in Santa Cruz because she is in Santa Cruz.
And
Go ahead.
not to disparage any companies, but Lisa just found out what Wegmans return plant policy is. And they have a 7-day return plant policy. But that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, please shop there if you like, but I won't be shopping there anymore because for fun, I mean, this was totally for fun, but I bought a grafted cucumber. I usually just start my cucumbers myself, but I thought, what the heck? I want to see if a grafted cucumber is like a million times better than a normal cucumber. And so I planted it, and of course it doesn't die right away. It took like 2 months to die. I mean, I watered it, it looked okay, didn't look so great. And I took very good care of the plant. I had my own cucumbers that I had started myself right next to it. And mine took off and thrived. This one died. I brought it back and it was expensive. It was like $11.99. I mean, that's a lot of money to pay for a plant. Anyway, I was not very happy with them. I usually don't give negative Yelps, but I gave them a negative Yelp. Anyway, that's an aside. So buy nice seedlings, make sure they're as tall as they are wide. You'll see when a seedling looks stressed out, like it hasn't been watered correctly, or if it's trying to find the sun. So they should be kind of like this little seedling down here. It should be kind of plump and nice looking. Those are little seed leaves, and then that's the first true leaf on it. So and you can pop it out of the little 6-pack and look at its roots and make sure the roots aren't root bound and that it hasn't been in that 6-pack since last spring or something. So buy nice stuff. You're going to have more success, or of course start your own. And the advantage there is the huge variety of seeds. I mean, there's hundreds of good seed companies, and there's just so many different varieties you can grow, which is super fun.
And I would just say, if you do buy brassicas from the nursery, before you plant them, just look on the underside of the leaves, and if you see a little tiny green caterpillar, kill it.
Yeah, so those are cabbage moths, and
those are cabbage moths, and they will eat your seedling down to nothing.
Down to the nubbins. Okay, that's my son Ryan. We used to run a farm stand. We haven't done it in a couple of years, but
who's now driving?
What?
Who is now driving?
Yeah, he now has his driver's license, so you can see how old that is. Sowing requirements. So as Kathleen was saying, what must be, when we call it direct sow, that means you put the seed directly into the ground in your raised bed, or if you're growing in the ground, into your soil. That's what direct sowing is. And you'll notice that all these have in common is they're all root, carrot, beet, turnip, radish. They're all root vegetables. So you have to direct sow those. You shouldn't buy those as seedlings, just direct sow them.
I would also say fava beans should be over there.
Yeah, where are my fava? Do I have that?
You have them in the either.
Yeah.
It's really not worth buying a 6-pack of fava beans.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay, it's a good point. So either direct sow or sow them in flats, which sow them in flats as if you're seeding yourself. You could also buy them in a 6-pack. Arugula is so easy to grow. You know, I would just throw out some arugula seeds because it's going to grow. Throw them out, and then you can just take like a little rake or something, or just put a little compost on top. Keep them moist for about 3-4 days, and you'll have arugula. And August is August through November, so you can start your arugula now. You can go buy your seed now. Kale, same thing. You, I think, direct sow kale a lot more than I do, Kathleen. I usually start it in flats.
Yeah, I just do because you can buy it in bulk and it's pretty inexpensive, and you know, it's good to go.
Yeah. Spinach is pretty easy to direct sow.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more affordable to buy seeds than plants.
And chard, whenever I see a 6-pack of chard, there's like 10 plants in there.
Yeah.
I always direct sow chard.
Okay. Okay. And then what must be, so these are more the prima donna ones over here. And so they must be sown in flats or by little seedlings, broccoli, you know, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, all the things that you're growing now. And then some of them, the reason why basil's there is just because you can't put the little plant out. It would get frost if you put it out, let's say in February or March. So that's why you seed it and then plant it out in May. And that's true of some of these others as well. But these are a little bit more the prima donna ones.
And the soil's not warm enough for them to germinate.
Right. So like a tomato, so our parents were both farmers, and my mom always had a garden growing up when we were growing up. And she would always say, they're from the Dakotas, until you can sit bare butt in the soil, you can't grow your tomato plants yet. So you've got to wait till that soil's nice and warm before you put out your tomato plants. All right. Oh, how? So bed prep. This is how I do it. Kathleen, you might have different ways, but so there's my seedlings that I purchased on top left. And what I like to do is I like to have compost and soil on hand. What I find is if you go buy seedlings, but you don't have the bed prep stuff on hand, you just skip that step, and you don't really want to skip that step. So this is actually horse manure compost from my dad has horses. And this is some essential soil from Lyngso, or it might be a little distill, maybe a little distill. But I mix that together and I put it on my bed and spread it out. And then so it looks nice, bottom left. Then I lay out my little plants. That's little broccoli plants. That's bok choy. My bok choy got really big this year. And then plant it all out in a little hexagon pattern. And then I water it. And that's it. That's how I plant. And you plant what? Any tips from you, Kathleen?
No, that's pretty much, you know, I don't do the horse manure mix. I just get some distill. I actually ask my clients to get distill, and I just put a couple bucketfuls in each bed, spread it out, and then plant. And then after I plant, is it after or before it, I mulch with a G&B soil conditioner. I've also used Lyngso's, I think it's their soil amendment. I use as a mulch. Just, you know, until those plants are big enough to cover the soil, I want some kind of mulch down.
Yeah.
It's a really fine mulch. I mean, we saw one guy that his soil actually looked to me like this mulch. It's just a very fine shredded wood, not shredded redwood, which is hydrophobic, but just a nice fine mulch.
Yeah, I do. Oops, sorry about that. I do want to point out, this is my husband made these for me, but you can see them kind of on the ground here, but I find with the little baby brassicas, the birds like to come and eat them. So I do cover, it doesn't have to be a fancy thing like this. We'll get to a slide. You can just put floating row cover over, you can put tulle over. And like I said, we'll get to that, but you do want to cover those little babies. Okay, direct sowing. Well, we kind of covered this, but just read your seed packet. But you just go ahead and put the little seed right in the soil. And then this is floating row cover, which we will talk about in a second. And that's just to protect the seed so the bird doesn't come and eat the seed, and then the bird doesn't eat the little tiny seedling. That's plant spacing. Again, I would just read the tag on the plant, or
Yeah, I think you need more room for broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage.
yeah, I probably should have put 2 feet there. I used to plant them really far apart, and now that I'm in raised beds, I'm planting them tighter. But probably I'd say 2 feet instead of 1 foot.
Yeah, I find in raised beds, especially when you have a cover on them, if stuff is too close together, then you can get some insect problems,
Yeah,
especially aphids.
yeah. I think I'll revise that slide. Single. Oh, it says single pool. That's supposed to say single pole. Whoops. for the tomatoes. Transplanting off. I like to offset. So that's how I plant.
Just like cookies.
But that it's probably probably a little close.
Yeah.
Now we're into protection, bugs, blights, and birds. So we kind of did talk about this. A good resource is if you just Google UCIPM, and they will give you information on, you see a bug on your broccoli, you see a great big huge worm on your tomato. Just Google UCIPM tomato gigantic worm, and stuff will come up, and they're really it's a great resource.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have it.
Yeah, and planting hedgerows, so you'll see like a hedgerow. My garden is in the rest of my landscape, and so I have manzanita, and so I have other things blooming that brings good birds and good insects. Most insects, like 99% of insects, are good insects, so you don't want to indiscriminately be killing things. Most things are good.
And most damage that even the bad insects cause is minimal, and at least I can live with it.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
No, like when my broccoli gets aphids, I just shake them off, like pop, tap them on something, and most of the aphids fall out, and what doesn't, I eat.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, brassicas, you can get aphids or whitefly. Whitefly, I just use water and just wash them off. Leaf miners have never bothered me. The goosefoot family gets leaf miners. So a leaf miner gets between the 2 layers of the leaves and makes a little path through there. I mean, I just will either not eat that leaf, or I'll just cut it out if the bug's still in there. If it's not in there, I just eat it. It's just fine. Sluggo, I do put out sluggo for spring planting of brassicas. This time of year, I don't think you have to put sluggo out.
Well, it depends on where you are. In Santa Cruz, we still have slugs and snails.
Okay.
If you're where it's hot, you don't. But if you're in a cooler climate, you probably still would want to.
Yeah. And I should say that, like with the aphids and whitefly, that I find it's more of my February planted stuff going into spring. I'll get aphids, but my stuff now that I'm planting going into fall, I won't get an aphid infestation. So again, it's same plant, different time of year, you're going to get different issues. Oh, this doesn't have anything to do with fall vegetables, but it's just, we've been seeing this with clients. One, we've seen verticillium. How many clients, Kathleen, have verticillium?
2.
Two. Okay. So,
And I haven't seen I mean, this is the first time in what I've been doing this 12 years.
wow.
I've never run across verticillium, so I'm not sure exactly why, but yeah.
All
And
right.
that's how you know you have it, is that little brown streak in the stem there.
Oops, sorry. Oop. So right here, you can see
Yeah.
the brown, and then the leaves, this isn't that great of a picture, but you're going to see yellowing kind of in a V pattern at the end of the leaf. And that is a sign that you have verticillium. And unfortunately, it's a fungus that lives in your soil for a really, really long time. They say 27 years. And after you have it, you can't plant any crop that's susceptible to it in that soil. And it's a wide range of things that are susceptible to verticillium. Like,
And if you do get verticillium, I mean, we've been told that to rotate a crop, even if you move it a foot, it counts as, moving it enough. But I can tell you, in these beds, which are my prime beds, I'm gonna have to use at least one of them. I'm gonna have to plant hybrids that are VFN, which means verticillium, fusarium, and nematode resistant. I
Yeah.
can't plant heirlooms in that bed anymore.
it is sad.
Yeah.
And then something we saw last year for the first time, and then this year we've seen it twice or 3 times.
3 times at least.
3 times is the tomato russet mite. And again, we've been gardening for decades and we hadn't seen this before. And now all of a sudden we're seeing it a lot. So it's a tiny little mite. You need a 14 time. I don't have my loop with me, but you're not going to be able to see it on the tomato leaf with your naked eye. You're going to need a loop, and a good loop.
But
It
the leaves will be like metallic looking.
Yeah, they're going to look kind of bronze or silver, and that's how you know you have this russet mite. And I just read the UCIPM on it, and now I think sulfur.
Sulfur is their recommendation. What I've been doing, and I just saw it Monday at one of my clients, I just took all the leaves off that had it, and then I went up another level and took off the leaves that didn't look damaged yet.
Yeah.
But the mites were probably moving their way up. They start at the bottom and they moved their way up. So I took off a lot of leaves and I gave them to the chickens.
Yeah.
I don't leave those leaves. Don't chop and drop those leaves.
Yeah, the little mites will just climb right back up.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not fall gardening, but
That's an aside for just what's happening right now in our world.
Yeah, what's happening now in our world. I added this because we moved 3 years ago, and I moved to the base of Windy Hill in Portola Valley, and I have so much wind in my garden, and it's just a new experience for me. I mean, I thought I was such a good gardener. Where I was gardening before in Woodside, I had a half acre completely flat that I had been putting compost on for years and years and years, and then started planting out my crops. And I had so much produce. The reason why we had farm stands was I had so much produce, I didn't know what to do with it, so we started selling it. And now in Portola Valley, I'm like lucky if I get 1 tomato per plant. I mean, the wind really has affected how my confidence, for one thing. But so my husband, who's an engineer, he's now mean, maybe one of the benefits of COVID, there's all this plexiglass that people are selling now. Maybe they're going to have to hold on to it because of Delta. But anyway, we're putting plexiglass like panels around that I can easily take out when I need to work, work in the bed. But we're just going to try stuff and see how I can make it so these poor plants aren't just whipped around by the wind. It's like torrential force winds. So stay tuned. Orrin Martin at UC Santa Cruz, he has information about growing a garden in wind. Hopefully a year from now, I'll be able to have some tips about that.
Yeah, and some plants are way more susceptible to wind than others.
Yeah, like citrus hates wind, right?
Yeah, citrus hate wind.
Yeah. This, I grow my tomatoes up a pole. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's not a tomato class, but protection. So we went into this a little bit, but so that's my cat, Zazo. Zazo is up on the screen that we put over. But I've used, so this is my old garden, but floating row cover after I have seeded a bed, I just put that over, or you can just go to like Joanne Fabrics or something like that, and you can buy tulle and you can put tulle over. You're just trying to keep the birds out of eating the seed and eating the little tiny seedling. I might like tulle a tiny bit better because you can actually see it. And the floating row cover, I think 30% of the sun, it doesn't get through, only 70% gets through. And the tulle, more sun gets through. So I do like that. And I have my little hoops. I did the same thing you did, Kathleen, where I put rebar in the ground and then I put little hoops over it to later on if I need to throw a bird net over or use it that way. And then this is a client's house that put, these are really nice, put up like a more of a permanent structure over her beds. Anything, Kathleen, about?
Use Sluggo, don't use Sluggo Plus. It kills worms.
Okay, yeah, so that for where I'm at, I only have to use it in spring, but if you're in a really wet area, you might have to use it more than that.
Yep.
Rodent control.
Good luck.
Have fun. For gophers, there's cinch traps. So my Christmas present this year were these Have a Heart squirrel. I have a real bad squirrel problem. And I have used them. But I haven't caught anything yet. My brother Kent, who his brain is exactly like a squirrel brain. He can, he knows he can think just like a squirrel. And so he's like super successful at catching them.
No, he's really good at catching gophers.
He's good at catching squirrels too.
Really?
Yeah, he's like an expert. So he's given me all these tips and I still have not caught any squirrels. And the reason I want to catch squirrels, we had a peach tree, well, our apricot tree. So we had like 50 or so. These trees were only 3 years old, but we had like 50 apricots. The squirrels got every single apricot. And then my peach tree, they got about half, they probably got about 200 peaches. And then I went ahead and took the rest of the peaches off the tree, even though they were still green, and we're eating them now because they're ripening up. But that's, you want tree ripened fruit. And now I have another peach tree that's coming in and I already see the gnawing. They're already starting to gnaw on those peaches. So it's illegal, I should say, I think, to kill a furry animal. And it's also, I think, illegal to take it off your property and release it into somebody else's property.
It's illegal to kill native squirrels.
Okay.
But it's not illegal to kill tree squirrels.
Okay.
But your method of killing has to be carbon dioxide poisoning.
Oh,
which is pretty unrealistic. It means you have to make an airtight container that the trap fits into, and then you pump it with carbon dioxide. I mean, nobody's going to do it, but that's the law.
Okay, thanks. I didn't know it. And also,
you can hire people though.
yeah, just let them go. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. That's all I'm going to say about that. Deer, you can either have like a 7 or 8 foot fence or 2 fences that are 5 feet apart and 5 feet tall. And that is effective to keep deer out of your garden if that's a problem for you. And we're getting close to the end. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Harvesting. Just want to say harvesting takes a lot of time. It is very time consuming, especially if you have things like cherry tomatoes or even my lemon cucumbers here.
Green beans.
Yeah, green beans and snow peas and sugar snap peas and great big huge heirloom tomatoes. They don't take as much, or the huge gigantic. This is a Black Beauty eggplant, but anything that's tiny takes just so much time. So just keep that in mind. Beans and peas, you want to be harvesting them all the time because you're going to get way more crop that way. They're going to keep producing that way because they don't think that they're going to die pretty soon by their seeds maturing. Broccoli, after you cut off that center head, you're going to get a whole bunch of side sprouts. So it's not like cauliflower. Cauliflower is like a single service vegetable. After you take out that central head, you're not going to get a whole bunch of side sprouts. Successive sowing, so like a beet or something, let's say you're taking out 4 beets for dinner, you might want to pop in 4 new seeds so you can keep, like a single serving vegetable, you want to kind of keep sowing it so you have a longer season of eating it.
Yeah, or like with carrots, I way overseed my carrots. And as I thin them, I take out the biggest, and then the little ones then have room to grow. So I extend the season that way, which is kind of easier.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. All righty, let's see.
I think that's it.
General garden. Oh, these are just things that Kathleen and I, so we do garden consultations from time to time. And I'd say 100% of the time, it's always the same issue. And that is either people themselves or their mow and blow people. They're blowing all their leaves off of the soil. So their soil is becoming like cement, literally like cement. I mean, and because they're not keeping it covered, they're not keeping the leaves on the soil. So you need to leave the leaves or mulch or both. I do both. I mulch and leave the leaves. So that will save you $100. And
full sun means full sun.
yeah, full sun means full sun. And if you have trees and you are not an expert pruner, we would say hire. I should mention Kathleen's an ISA certified arborist. I would say hire an arborist because we see a lot of bad cuts on trees. Cover your soil, no naked soil. Weed in February, weed.
And Lisa says February because that's before they set seeds.
Yeah.
So you want to pull that weed before it sets seed, and then the seeds are all over everything. Except field bindweed, do not pull field bindweed, cut it off.
Yeah, and just look up field bindweed if that doesn't make sense to you. There's me 10 years ago with a huge cauliflower, and then that was dinner, beets, and I still do have broccoli. My sugar snap peas self-sowed, and so I know you shouldn't have in August your sugar snap peas, but I do.
Nice.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of funny. Okay, Q&A. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen, and then maybe Cam can do the Q&A.
All right, yeah, thank you. I'm going to go back and then start from the beginning. There are lots of questions regarding cover crops, but I don't think I'm going to address them for the Q&A session here because I've shared a link from Lisa and Kathleen's cover crop class. So we'll go ahead and let you folks explore that recording to get the answers on that. So skipping over the cover crops, let's start with this question here. Does raised bed mean open at the bottom or closed? And if it's open, can't the plants still access minerals, or are the roots too short?
Do you want me to take this one, Kathleen?
Sure.
Okay. They are open at the bottom. I mean, you would probably put some hardware cloth to keep gophers out. So yes, and roots for a tomato plant are like 8 feet deep. So they do access the minerals. And there are minerals in the soil, especially if you're using good soil. But when they're in the ground, there's not that first 2-3 feet that is engineered soil versus native soil. But Kathleen, do you want to add something to that?
Well, a lot of hardware cloth makes it difficult for the roots to get down into your native soil. So if you just are growing directly in your native soil, there's more life and nutrients in your native soil.
Yeah, it's not bad to grow in raised beds. I mean, that's what I do, but it's just less expensive not to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's the fun question. So how can you tell if it's a squirrel or a rat eating cucumbers and tomatoes still hanging on the plants?
I don't know how to tell the difference between a squirrel and a rat. Kathleen, do you know?
Probably if you go on UCIPM, it might show bite marks. Either way, you have a problem that you need to trap. I honestly can say I have never seen squirrels eat tomatoes. I have seen rats, and I've seen rats eat zucchini, melons, cucumbers, but I don't know that squirrels go for that.
I think you're right. I think my squirrels eat my fruit off my fruit trees, but if it's in the garden, it's rats.
Yeah. Or mice.
Pardon me?
Well, it could be mice, I think.
Maybe. We've got 2 cats, and I think that really helps the population. But what I did 3 years ago, I went and bought a lot, like 15 rat traps, and I put them, I did set them, and I put them all in my tomato bed because I was starting to lose a lot of tomatoes. And the funny thing is I never even caught a rat, but all the activity stopped of them eating my tomatoes. I don't know if they knew what a rat trap was. I don't know why, but after I did that, there was no more rat problem.
Word got out.
Yeah, exactly.
Alrighty, thank you. Another suggestion I've gotten from other speakers is a wildlife cam. Those are really affordable nowadays. You could just sort of have like a Bluetooth enabled or Wi-Fi enabled wildlife cam that you can put out if you have the means to do that.
Yeah, or you could also sprinkle flour around the area, and by the paw prints, you could probably tell if it's a squirrel or a rat.
That's a great idea, yeah. Okay, so next question is interesting one. What do you think about using watered down human urine as fertilizer?
Yeah.
Full of nitrogen.
Yeah. Do you think you have to watch salt content at all, Kathleen?
Eat a low salt diet.
Yeah, I would Google it and maybe read a little bit more about it, but there are lots and lots of countries that use that compost human waste and use it in their crops.
And urine is sterile. I mean, it's poop. I went to cooking school and I had to take food safety. Poop is bad, urine is sterile. So I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, during the drought, well, I don't know, this might be too much information, but I much prefer going to the bathroom outside versus inside. And so, and then I pay my husband and my son to, since they have the means more than I do, please urinate outside on a plant. So I don't see anything wrong with it, but I'd Google it just to make sure. The only thing I'd be worried about is salt.
Yeah.
Or medication, if you're taking that, you probably don't want that in the soil.
And I
Yeah.
will say, I wouldn't do it on an edible. I would do it like when I pee outside, I just do it on a non-edible plant, on a grass or something. But I don't do it on my edibles. Nobody's ever come into a farm stand again.
Okay, so next question is, how do you control pests in the ground? Isn't it easier for pests to invade with in-ground gardens as opposed to, raised bed gardens?
Yeah, but I can say I think I had less pest problems when I was gardening in the ground than in raised beds. Raised beds, I feel like I have to build Fort Knox around them. But in the ground, I'd still use some floating row cover and some tulle. And I did have those, you saw the rebar with the things, and I might put a bird net over it. But I also, just in fairness, I have a dog and I have 2 cats, and they're in the garden all the time. So I think that also helps keep pest population down.
I also think when you grow in ground, you space things out more because you're not so confined. And when you space things out more, you tend to have less pest problems. I grew in the ground and my pest problems are minimal.
Yeah.
But I don't have gophers. If you have gophers, that's a whole different issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that case, you'd probably want to put like a gopher wire down before you even start your in-ground gardening.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to drought. So this person's really worried about the drought, and they're thinking of not growing this fall, and they may just wait until October, November to see about planting garlics and onions. So they're wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I went to a drought seminar. This was actually many years ago. And I pretty much asked that exact same question. And the presenter said, if you take a bigger picture of things, that growing your own vegetable uses less water in California because of the transportation, the washing of the produce, and just the processing of it. And farmers don't water as efficiently as probably a home gardener does, but it's a big picture view. It's better for California, it's better for the state and for everybody, but for an individual person, you're going to be using more water than you would if you don't grow.
Yeah, that, and I would just add a fall planted garden, and you could certainly, almost all of these, you can wait till September instead of August. And with any luck, you'd only be watering for a couple of months. And November, well, for one thing, the days are a lot shorter, so you need a lot less water because it's cooler and not as much sunlight. But for drought tolerant gardening, which I took a class once on drought tolerant gardening, it wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be. What it was about is make sure you're growing vegetables during the winter, make sure you're growing winter crops, which what we're talking about is fall, winter planting, August, September, October. So yeah, you're going to have to water those little seedlings, like I say, for a couple of months, but then the rains water them for you, and it would be a shame to miss all that free water. So I would, if you're really worried about, let's say, your own water bill or your own water consumption, the best thing you could do is to grow winter vegetables. You might not want to grow summer vegetables because though you do have to water, you can't, there's no rain to count on. So, but I would definitely grow a fall winter.
A lot of people dry summer their tomatoes.
Yeah, and I do in September. I'll cut off all water in September to my garden. But I've been watering it since May.
But also most people overwater.
Yeah.
Right now I'm watering in ground. I'm watering 20 minutes every 10 days.
Oh, every 10 days.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And
It's
okay.
Yeah. I'm watering twice a week right now. I did notice on Lyngso website, they're saying like 3 to 4 times a week. And I'd say at the most 2 times a week, but you don't need to be watering 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, and that's another benefit of in-ground water. If it's a area that's been cover crop for a couple years, my organic matter is so high that I don't need to water as much.
Yeah, it saves like, was it you, Kathleen? It's like saves 50% of your water. If you're mulching, if you have living soil, if you have green manure, cover crops, you can save about 50% of water. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know I said I'm not going to ask any cover crop questions, but I'm going to ask you folks 2 questions just to clarify. I see that you have some root crops as cover crops, but not beets. They're not a fan of eating beets, but would it be okay to grow them as cover crops?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just do the same trap and drop method and let the beets be. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So another person here is asking, when you trap and drop, do you do that with veggies as well, or just the cover crops?
Everything.
With everything.
Even when I prune my fruit trees, I just leave the branches on the ground.
Chop and drop. Now, if you're concerned about fire,
Blight.
well, that would be more if it was fruit tree pruning. It's not going to apply to vegetable gardening. But I've been reading a lot about mulch. I mulch everything. My whole property is mulched. But and this is a little off subject, but it's about 2 to 4 inches max. It's little chips, not big chips. And that should not, and not within 5 feet of your house, but it should not present a fire danger if that's how you are mulching. I know I got off subject there because that's not what we were talking about.
It's valid right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. There were several questions on one of the slides that you said, don't use a closed loop system. Could you elaborate on what that is?
Yeah.
This Lisa and I don't understand why this happens, but if this is your raised bed and you have irrigation lines running like this, at the end, that irrigation line should end. It shouldn't connect to another line, so the whole thing is like a rectangle with lines running. Does that make sense? That you don't want. What you want is a line up on top, typically a 1/2 inch line, and then you want 1/4 inch or net FM coming down from your main line and ending, not connecting to something else, to the loop.
Yeah, and at the end, you can have like a little 1 gallon emitter. I mean,
A
you could
1/2 gallon emitter.
or a 1/2 gallon emitter. So, but that way you're flushing out your system. What we don't understand, and we see it over and over again, is the closed loop system. And then there's no way to flush out your system. So we don't know why people who install irrigation do that.
And it's a huge waste of plastic because you have like 3 times more plastic than you need to.
Yeah. And it's more expensive.
Yes, I just don't get it.
We don't get it.
We don't get it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to, okay, so this person lives in Portland where it's very hot and dry, and they try germinating seeds. And even with ample watering multiple times a day, they end up dying, and they're wondering what to do for that.
Sequester carbon so we don't have global warming.
Are they putting mulch on top of the seeds? Is that person available to talk?
Let's see.
If
Are
they
you
are,
covering-
or
Are you covering your seeds with something so that it's not just on top of the soil? Because if you have just a little layer of mulch, and it doesn't need to be much, that should keep it moist enough, and it could even be that you're overwatering. And what's that called, Pam? There's a disease that they get.
it's like dropping off or something, but that's not it.
Yeah, seedling wilt, something like that, she could actually be overwatering and loving her plants to death, which I used to see a lot when I worked in the nursery.
But you could even just put like floating row cover over and
Yeah.
just water the floating row cover, and that'll keep the seed. You do want the seed moist because it, that's what it needs to germinate. It has to be warm and moist.
But it does need to be covered. You don't need.
Yeah, I'm wondering also what kind of seed, because spinach, if it's in the Chenopodese family, it needs kind of cool soil. If it is Soliencia, it's going to need warm soil to germinate. There's different temperatures of soil for different seeds. And you could just look that up online of what, what temperature soil it needs to be.
Yeah, you can find that in the land of Google. But, just keeping them damp. They don't need to be wet. Just damp.
So do you perhaps recommend maybe seeding indoors and then care for them and planting them outside, sort of transferring them in flats or grow them in a greenhouse or something?
I do that.
Yeah, unless it's a root crop. And then I would any root crop needs, you don't want it right on top of the soil, because that's going to dry out like crazy. You're not going to be able to keep it moist. But I suspect it might be an overwatering. I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll move on to planting space. So if you're planting far apart, what do you do with the soil in the middle? If it seems like a lot, should you interplant that space?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a great idea.
In fact, underneath my, I have now been planting cress. I've just been throwing out cress seeds underneath my taller plants. I plant carrots with my tomatoes. You could even throw out just some flower seeds that, like lobelia or something low growing, violas. But yeah, just to have roots in the ground.
Yeah. And right now, you could do lettuce seeds. There's so many easy things to grow from seed right now.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so question regarding leaf miners. This person can't seem to get rid of leaf miners, and they did not plant any goosefoot for 3 years. They tried chard, and before I could take them out of my greenhouse, they were infested. So any tips on getting rid of leaf miners?
I love leaf miners. I think they're one of the most interesting insects, and you can watch the little path in the leaf get bigger and bigger and bigger as that maggot gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That I think if you take one of those leaves and hold it up to the sun and you see that path and the little bug, you too will learn to love leaf miners and not be bothered by them. Honestly, they don't hurt the plant. That it's an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, although this person might have, it sounds like almost like an infestation or something. It sounds like every single leaf. Well, who knows if they can unmute themselves, they could ask. But I get leaf miners too. What you've done is completely right. Not growing goosefoot family in the same soil for 3 years should have broken the cycle, because they need the same host plant year after year. And just as long as it's, spinach, beets, everything listed under that amaranth, quinoa, chard. As long as you're not growing any of those in the soil, it's surprising to me that they have stuck around for 3 years of none of those crops in the soil. So I don't know.
Maybe, do you both know, do you think compost tea may work for something like this or no?
You know, probably not, because the egg is between the layers in the leaf. So the only thing that would kill that egg would be a systemic pesticide, which would make that plant inedible because it's loaded with pesticides. So, I mean, I don't know.
I'd look up UC IPM and see if they have any ideas. But yeah, the little maggot is protected by having the leaf above him and below him.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think you need to learn to love them.
Okay, so on the topic of pests, this person has a verticillium wilt on the tomato plants, and they do container gardening. What can they plan to reuse that soil?
Oh, if it's container gardening, if it's really just a pot of soil, get rid of that soil. Don't, I mean.
Well, you could plant cucumbers, you could plant
well, you could plant brassicas, you could plant chinnapresi, you could plant.
Yeah, just don't plant anything in the nightshade family. But I mean, if it's not a huge container, I would just put that soil in my green bin.
Yeah, I would too. The host for verticillium, it's a huge host family. So look it up. I would recommend looking up because it's maple trees, it's
arbutus, it's
arbutus, grapes. I mean, so many things are susceptible to verticillium that, yeah, it depends on the size of the pot. But if it's just a pot, I personally I wouldn't take the risk of that going to to the rest of the garden. I somehow got verticillium in my front yard. I don't even know how. I've never grown Solanaceae there. And I lost a huge maple tree to verticillium. So you kind of don't want to mess around with it.
Is there a way to test the soil for the presence of verticillium?
It's a fungi, and it's like 5 different species of fungi. I'm sure there is. I don't know if it'd be expensive because they have to look for just that fungi. But,
I would Google it.
Yeah, I'd Google it or look at UCIPM.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the fun question. Since we're in the drought and fire hazards are everywhere around us, any recommendations for less flammable compost or ground cover?
Well, there's rocks. I mean, a lot of people are near their house for a mulch or ground cover are using like pebbles or rocks. I read about it last night because a friend put never ever use mulch, and that's such the wrong message, I think. And so I still, in your garden, this is not in your vegetable garden, but just in your garden in general, I would still use mulch. Just don't put it super thick, and just make sure the chips are smallish, and you should not have a problem. The reason why you want to use mulch is it's trapping the moisture in the soil and keeping that moisture where it should be. Without any mulch at all, just bare ground, all the moisture is going to evaporate, and it's worse. And your plants are dry. I mean, I think then it's worse for fire danger. So I'd keep the mulch. I'd keep wood mulch, but just not 5 feet within by your house. Do you have anything, Kathleen, you want to?
Well, I was going to say you could plant like yerba buena, which is a low growing native ground cover that doesn't need a ton of water. And then you have green living plant that's going to be fire resistant as well.
Yeah, or manzanita. I mean, there's some manzanita that are more like ground covers. that might be a way to go. Again, no vegetation and nothing flammable within 0 to 5 feet of your house. From 5 to 30, limited vegetation. After 30 feet, you can kind of do what you want.
Okay, yeah, and there's also a great fire escaping class on our community resources page if anyone wants to watch that. It's a plethora of information as well.
They would know way more than we would. We're just kind of shooting from the hip on this one.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, you're right. Yeah. They're
I'm
definitely,
interested in it.
sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, it was just something I'm super interested in, so I'm going to try to start educating myself on it.
Yeah. The bottom line is we really ought to use compost and mulch. You can't just not use mulch because of fire danger. You know, composted mulch would be ideal to preserve that water. So, and not a fan of using rocks for mulch for vegetable gardens. So it doesn't do much good. Okay, so the next question is about hoses, watering hose. Just saw that many use electronic waste. What suggestions on hoses that are lead and toxic free, PVC, rubber, polyurethane, any particular brands and such?
I have no idea.
I don't know either. That's a good question, but I don't know. So that's something to research.
I know there is a emitter line that is gopher resistant. It'll have a blue line along it. You know, like the 1/2 inch emitter line. I would not use that because I know it has insecticide or some kind of pesticide in it, but beyond that, I have no idea.
Okay, that's fair. So let's move on to this really important question here. Folks want to dig out their lawn or get rid of their lawn and start a vegetable garden. What's the best way to do that? To get rid of a lawn, to start a veggie garden?
Well, that one.
Can taught the class on that, I think.
People.
On sheet mulching and yeah. So is
Yeah.
that, is that a recorded class that somebody could go watch? Is that on the Lyngso website?
It is. It's on the Lyngso website. It's called How to Sheet Mulch. So that's probably the first thing that I would do. You can let your lawn dry out. And if you have an irrigation system, just be careful not to cut into that if you are digging out. But, you know, go ahead and watch that. But sheet mulching is probably the way to go to get rid of the lawn and start a veggie garden. And
Yeah.
you know, you can do raised beds there too if you have the means to. If not, growing in ground is perfectly fine.
I did broad fork my front lawn, and I broke a lot of irrigation lines doing it. Just be careful of your irrigation lines when you're digging, broad forking, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so question, how to safely use or reuse kitchen water for planting?
I do that. I mean, if I have a basin in my tub, I don't put it on edibles. I'll always put it on landscape plants. And I think Kathleen, you guys are putting in a gray water system.
Yeah, we're going to. We haven't yet, but we're going to.
Yeah. I mean, I try to use, as I have a bucket in my, when I'm letting the water get warm in my shower, I have a bucket there and I put it on plants, and I try as much as I can to use every drop and keep it on site.
Yeah, and it uses soap that is, this is actually something you can look up. An urban farmer up in San Francisco has some great resources on their website, but there's certain soaps you want to avoid. So I would just look that up. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Another great resource is, again, our community resources page. Look up gray water class. Alan Hackler teaches the lawn rated landscape class. really, really thorough explanation of how to set up a system if you don't have one already. So that's a great resource to look into. Okay, so the next question is, again, going back to cover crops, will the chopped roots regrow plants?
Sometimes.
They might.
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes that's a benefit. Like I was saying earlier with my cabbage, just cut it at ground level, and then I got 5 more cabbages. So,
Yeah,
If
and
you-
my daikon radishes, I mean, if you're familiar with a daikon radish, they're a long white, they're very long, and they're about this thick around, that I cut them off probably several inches below the root top, and they grew again, so I just cut them off again, and that just keeps pumping carbon into my soil.
and then the roots do decay. I mean, it does not take them that long. I'd say when I cut off a broccoli plant, certainly within 6 months, all the roots have decayed. And the nice thing with that is they're putting, where they decay, then it's little oxygen tunnels so it's putting oxygen into your soil too, which you need. Obviously, you need water and oxygen, I think, in equal measure in your soil. So that's the benefit of letting, and it's adding organic matter. Every single soil, if you do have your soil tested, I can tell you what it'll say. It'll say add organic matter. And one way of doing that is just leaving those roots in the ground, because you're adding organic matter to your soil. When I come and plant again, let's say I had a bed full of broccoli, there'll be a little stub left, like a little hard stub, and that I just pull out. But all the other roots have long decayed or decomposed.
So if the plants are diseased, what do you recommend? Do folks, can they chop and drop in their location, compost, or throw it in their green bin to compost?
It depends on the disease. I would. Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, I'd say like peach leaf curl, verticillium. There's some things that I probably wouldn't put into my compost pile, but you know what? If you have verticillium, it doesn't matter. It's too late.
They just said disease. They didn't say what disease.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd agree with Kathleen. It depends. I mean, if it's something like the leaf miner, I would just rotate and not grow that in there, but I'd go ahead. I'd have no problem with putting that into a compost pile.
Probably most diseases, though, I would put in the green bin, because like if it's a virus or a fungus, I mean, you're gonna have to be a pretty good composter to kill those guys,
All the spores. Yeah.
all the spores, and get it hot enough to kill. So yeah, I mean, that's the problem with city compost, right? Everybody puts in the green bin what they won't put in their compost pile.
Yep. Yeah, and the thing with a municipality compost, it is a large scale operation, and it does get to be heated and pathogen free. So there's a better composting situation than if you were to compost in your own backyard or something. So I'd probably throw it in the green bin.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, oh yeah, okay, so last, it's not really a question as much as a request, actually. The slide that you both put up with a photo of beneficial hedgerows, it was a little blurry, and folks are wondering if you could share a clearer picture of the beneficial hedgerows, or like a link to that. Maybe we can send them an email with them.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, I can look at that slide. I think I just grabbed that somewhere.
And that's another reason why I let my carrots go, my one carrot go to flower, is it's a beautiful umbel, and any umbel is gonna pull in beneficial insects. So if you see any umbel flower or natives are great.
Yeah.
So
Natives are great if they're in your garden. And then that whole family of umbels, carrots, parsley, celery, all will have that shape, and insects love those.
yeah,
That's-
and Achillea, yarrow, they love that.
And it's good. We want insects. You're trying to get an insectary in your garden.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's pretty much does it for all the questions, folks. Thank you
Great.
so much for attending, and thank you, Lisa and Kathleen, for another wonderful class. So much information.
Well, we keep learning more and more stuff, and we want to share our new knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. And that's what gardening is. It's also, we should mention, it's a lifetime. I mean, we're always reading more stuff and always learning more stuff. And then there's always somebody who knows way more than we will ever know. And so anyway, it's fun. And it's fun to learn from each other. It's fun to learn from your neighbors and share, tips and tricks.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both again so very much for doing this.
And thank Lyngsos. You guys are an amazing resource.
Yeah. Thank you, Lyngso.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you
All
at
right.
another class.
See you later. Bye.